Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sharing Stories podcast. In this channel, we discuss books. Today, we have This Is Where the Serpent Lives by Tariq Ashkanani. And right away, when you dive into this book, you are hit with this really fascinating contradiction that completely alters how you experience the entire story.
Oh, absolutely. It really is like a masterclass in duality. Because if you look at the immediate packaging of the story, the tone, the inciting incident, it presents itself as this highly claustrophobic, incredibly dark psychological crime thriller.
Right.
It feels like a very intimate murder mystery that is just absolutely dripping with personal trauma. But the moment you peel back that first layer, the true scope really reveals itself.
Yeah, it totally expands.
Exactly. The narrative expands into this sprawling, literally Pulitzer-level Chekhovian epic that spans 6 decades in Pakistan, starting all the way back in 1955.
Which honestly feels like an impossible magic trick. You have this tight, gripping tension of a murder mystery written by Tariq Ashkanani, who we know for that visceral darkness in Welcome to the World of Living, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Bring your book to life with AI. Plotsformovies.com helps you create movie-like trailers for your book, allowing filmmakers to visualize your story just the way you imagined it while writing. Enhance the storytelling experience to a whole new level with realistic characters, immersive voiceovers, and cinematic sound effects. No more boring stock images or generic clips. Captivate your audience, spark curiosity, make readers and filmmakers eager to explore more. Plotsformovies.com, where your story becomes cinema.
But then the broader canvas, like the epic world building, carries the distinct panoramic signature of Daniel Munudin. And our mission for this deep dive isn't to try and, separate those two identities.
Right, because that would be missing the point entirely.
Exactly. We want to explore how they are actually the exact same story. We are going to look at how a localized, brutal crime operates as a sort of keyhole through which we can view an incredibly rich tapestry about human nature, deep-seated systemic corruption, and really the terrible secrets we all keep just to survive.
Because the best way to understand how a massive 60-year societal epic functions is to examine the specific spark that ignites it. The story drops us right into a profoundly disturbing discovery.
It really doesn't hold back. Okay, let's unpack this. We have this brutal act of violence that shatters the quiet of a community.
Right, and initially it wears the mask of an isolated tragedy, just a terrible thing that happened on a given night. But it acts as a chemical catalyst.
Yeah, I always think about how a locked room mystery works. Usually you have a physical room, a dead body, and a very limited number of suspects. But here, the locked room isn't a physical space at all.
No, not at all.
The locked room is the rigid feudal class system of Pakistan itself. It's like a rock thrown through a stained glass window. It's not just about the rock. It's about how the shattered pieces distort the relationships of everyone standing behind it.
That is such a good analogy.
Yeah.
Because the characters literally can't just leave. The servants can't abandon their posts, and the elites definitely can't abandon their estates without losing their power.
So they're stuck.
Exactly. Yeah. So when this murder happens, they're all trapped together in this intense pressure cooker of social hierarchy, and that is the precise mechanism driving the tension. The narrative completely rejects the standard procedural formula.
Yeah, you don't get the brilliant detective gathering everyone in the drawing room to neatly explain the clues.
Right, there's no Poirot here. Instead, this single act of violence simply turns on all the lights in a very dark room, exposing a labyrinth of secrecy and deception that, frankly, was already there.
Which makes the psychological aftermath the true focal point. Because when a violent crime happens in an environment where everyone relies on unspoken rules of deference and power, the foundational trust of that society completely collapses.
And when trust collapses, every single mundane action is suddenly viewed through this cracked, paranoid lens.
Oh, man, yeah. Like if a servant drops a teacup, is it an accident? Yeah. Or are their hands shaking because of what they saw last night?
Or if a wealthy landowner suddenly decides to travel, is it a legitimate business trip or is he fleeing the country? The line between what these characters actually know and what they desperately suspect really begins to blur.
People you have known your entire life suddenly become terrifying strangers to you.
What's fascinating here is the genius of the title, This Is Where the Serpent Lives. Because the serpent is not just the literal person who committed the crime. It functions as this brilliant, multi-layered metaphor for hidden evil. Think about it. A snake doesn't loudly announce its presence. It camouflages itself in the garden.
It just uses the environment to hide.
Exactly. Waiting in the warm dark until someone steps just a bit too close. The title really suggests that evil isn't an external foreign force invading from the outside world. The serpent is literally born in the soil of this specific society.
So the danger is entirely domestic. Uncovering the truth about the murder becomes just as dangerous as the crime itself, because pulling that thread threatens to unravel everyone's life.
Yeah, the distinction between victim, witness, suspect, and perpetrator gets so incredibly murky.
Because everyone has a motive. And not necessarily a motive for the murder, but a motive to lie. A motive to hide their own unrelated sins that they've been carefully concealing for decades.
And that is the exact hinge where the narrative shifts gears. The intimate psychological thriller opens up into a sweeping portrait of a nation in flux. You really cannot separate the personal trauma of this one crime from the complicated, multi-generational histories of the people involved.
Which takes us out of that claustrophobic mental space and into this amazing panoramic view of Pakistan, starting in the mid-1950s. We're talking about a country less than a decade into its independence, you know.
Yeah, it's struggling to forge a modern identity while still being deeply anchored by centuries-old feudal traditions.
And we as the reader get to travel from the dazzling, chaotic energy of the cities down into the dusty, almost lawless expanses of the countryside. And the way the author maps this society is through these incredibly distinct, deeply flawed, and painfully believable characters.
The character architecture here is brilliant because it tackles the concept of upward mobility from completely different angles within this incredibly rigid system.
Let's look closely at three specific individuals who orbit the household of Colonel Atar. He's this powerful industrialist and politician. First, you have Yazid. We meet him in 1955 as an orphaned boy, literally fending for himself by selling tea in the chaotic Rawalpindi Bazaar.
A really tough beginning.
Yeah, but through sheer grit and this deep understanding of human nature, he actually manages to pull himself off the city streets. He secures a position of genuine responsibility and respect in the Colonel's Lahore household.
But Yazid's trajectory highlights a really brutal reality of this system. He plays by the rules, right? He does everything right to secure a safe life, but because he wasn't born into power, his position is entirely conditional.
It relies completely on the benevolence of the Colonel.
Exactly. So the moment conflicting loyalties arise, the moment the murder investigation threatens the household, Yazid's hard-won respectability becomes a massive liability. He has absolutely everything to lose.
And then you contrast that with Saqib. Saqib is born directly onto the Colonel's country estate to a poor gardener. So he isn't an outsider coming in. He is part of the estate's machinery from birth.
Right, he's baked into the system.
Yeah, and despite his low class, he proves himself so capable that he is entrusted with managing a pioneering business venture for the elites. But Saqib isn't content to just manage someone else's wealth. He overreaches.
He really does. He pushes violently against the boundaries of his station. And instead of rising within the system like Yazid, Saqib ends up an outlaw. He engages in literal warfare against the corruption of the Punjab Police. So you have these two men from the lower classes. One tries to assimilate and survive through quiet respectability, while the other tries to seize power and becomes an outlaw. And hovering above both of them at the absolute pinnacle of this societal pyramid is the Colonel's son,
Who inherits the world without having to lift a finger. Yet his life is entirely defined by a bitter, intense competition with his own brother over the love of a woman.
It's tragic, really.
It is. And the fallout of her eventual choice colors his entire existence with this completely unexpected darkness. I mean, he has all the money and power in the world, but he is utterly trapped by his own emotional legacy and the heavy expectations of his bloodline.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the connective tissue between Yazid, Saqib, and the Colonel's son is that none of them are making personal choices in a vacuum.
Right.
The genius of intertwining these arcs is that it demonstrates how the strict systems of caste, capital, and social power actually dictate human behavior. Whether it's Yazid trying to maintain his safety, Saqib trying to build an empire, or the Colonel's son wrestling with romantic failure, they are all constantly forced to choose between the path of pure morality and the path of worldly survival.
Because in a corrupt system, doing the right thing often means guaranteeing your own destruction. But, I struggle to see how an author pulls that off without giving the reader severe stylistic whiplash. Balancing the intimate, gripping tension of a psychological murder mystery where you're analyzing every sideways glance a character gives with the sprawling, heavy demands of mapping an entire society's class structure over 60 years.
It's a huge undertaking.
It seems like one side of the story would have to suffer. Either you lose the propulsive momentum of the thriller, or you shortchange the historical nuance of the epic. How does the narrative not just collapse under its own weight?
Well, the author solves this structural problem by utilizing the setting itself as the bridge between the micro and the macro. The tension of the thriller elements doesn't come from, cheap jump scares or constant action sequences,
Thank goodness.
right? It relies on a steadily escalating, suffocating sense of unease. And that unease is entirely generated by the environment. The locations, the sprawling estates, the crowded bazaars, they are not just backdrops.
No, they feel very alive.
They do. The immense gap between the wealthy elites and the working poor creates this constant low-frequency hum of danger. The societal structure itself is the trap. So when a crime exposes weaknesses in a single family, it is simultaneously exposing the fault lines of the entire nation.
It's why the literary world has drawn such heavy comparisons between this work and Anton Chekhov. And that is not a name you invoke lightly.
Definitely not.
Chekhov was the absolute master of the tragicomedy of everyday life. He wrote extensively about the dying Russian aristocracy and the serfs who served them, exposing the deep systemic miseries hiding just beneath the surface of polite, upper-class society.
The parallel to feudal Pakistan is incredibly striking. Both societies feature a deeply entrenched landed elite whose power is slowly being challenged by a shifting modern world.
Yeah.
And like you said, the setting thrums with such vitality that it operates as a living, breathing character. You have modern Pakistan, rife with political corruption and feudal violence, yet completely brimming with this unyielding human resilience.
You can feel it in the prose itself. The author has this rare, keen eye for sensory detail that grounds the massive themes into very physical realities. I mean, there are passages where you can practically feel the grit of the dust on your teeth.
Oh, totally.
Or the oppressive, palpable weight of a 110-degree summer night where the air just hangs dead and still outdoors. And then, in the very next breath, the writing zooms inward to describe the cold, calculated inner torment of a woman's soul with just shattering microscopic precision.
It's amazing.
It's a perfect balancing act between the sprawling external world and the claustrophobic internal emotional landscape. So what does this all mean for the reader?
Well, that balance is absolutely crucial for exploring the morality of the story, because there are no clear heroes here. There are no impossible cartoonish absolutes of right and wrong. The author meticulously unravels the gray areas of human behavior.
Which totally subverts what you expect when you sit down with a thriller. Usually, you are actively hunting for the bad guy. You want the moral satisfaction of the villain being caught, punished, and the natural order of the world being restored.
Right, the neat little bow at the end.
Exactly. But here, the distinction between victim and perpetrator is so blurry, it forces you to question what justice even means in an inherently unjust world.
It forces you to confront your own biases. The satire in the novel is razor sharp. The author can describe a wealthy, out-of-touch society matron hosting a garden party with the exact same dry irony used to describe a ruthless gangster securing a territory.
That is such a great point.
But beneath the satire, there's a constant beating question. How do any of us manage to justify our treatment of the people below us on the ladder? When Saqib becomes an outlaw, his choices are violent and heartbreaking. But when you look at the absolute lack of legitimate options he was given by the society he was born into, his dissent feels entirely understandable.
And to write with that level of nuance, you need a very specific vantage point. And Daniel Moinudin's background makes him perhaps one of the only writers equipped to tackle this duality.
His background is fascinating.
It really is. He grew up splitting his time between the ancient, complex culture of Lahore, Pakistan, and the rural, small-town environment of Elroy, Wisconsin.
Talk about culture shock.
Right. And he graduated from Dartmouth College and Yale Law School, practiced high-level corporate law in New York, and now divides his time between Oslo, Norway, and a working farm in Pakistan's South Punjab.
It's a truly global, yet deeply grounded perspective. He understands the Western-educated Pakistani elites from the absolute inside. He knows how they talk, how they justify their wealth, and how they wield their influence.
Because he's been in those rooms.
Exactly. But because he actively spends time managing a farm in South Punjab, he is equally observant of the deferential but incredibly shrewd underlings who actually run the agricultural estates. He watches the people who serve the tea. He probes the power dynamic between the master and the servant with such rich irony because he literally sees the entire board.
He is fluent in both the language of absolute power and the desperate language of survival. It's like he can write cinematically from a drone's eye view, capturing the sweeping historical changes across the Pakistani landscape, and then seamlessly zoom all the way down to a bitter microscopic resentment brewing in a servant's kitchen over a single misplaced word.
It really is stunning.
It's no wonder this has been called a future classic and a masterpiece of modern literature.
Because while the setting is highly specific, it operates as a sweeping parable of power and fortune that has universal application. The corrupting influence of power, the silent resentments of class inequality, and the terrifying lengths ordinary people will go to in order to protect their families and bury their secrets. Those aren't just Pakistani themes. They are fundamental human themes.
The human dignity found in the lowest caste characters and the sheer unjustness of how they are treated resonates powerfully no matter where in the world you are listening from. The tension between trying to be a good, moral person and simply trying to survive a brutal world is a conflict every single one of us wrestles with in some form.
Which leaves us with a rather profound, unsettling question to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. If the serpent in this story represents both intimate, personal betrayal and massive, inescapable systemic corruption, it really forces us to look in the mirror.
Yeah, it does.
When we are caught in systems that demand compromise, how much of our own morality is genuinely our own? And how much of our ethical code is simply dictated by what we must do to survive the social hierarchies we happen to be born into?
Wow. That is definitely something that will stick with you long after you put the book down. We at sharingstories.in are showcasing books by Indian authors through the hashtag Pushing Indian Authors campaign. This content is supported by plots4movies.com, an AI-enabled book trailer platform where you can watch one image trailer of the book to understand the book better before you buy it.
Such a great resource.
It really is. If you want to keep exploring fascinating stories and untangling complex mysteries like this one, we highly encourage you to consider subscribing and supporting the channel. And you absolutely need to buy this book and experience this masterpiece for yourself. You can find the link to read it right down in the description. Also, before you go, drop down into the comments and tell us what is your favorite book by an Indian author. We want to hear your recommendations and continue the conversation.
It has been a truly remarkable journey unpackaging this text with you today. It is incredible how a single act of violence, like a drop of ink in a glass of water, can spread to reveal the hidden truths of an entire world.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep looking past the surface of the story and be careful where the serpent lives.